US President Donald Trump's special envoy, Steve Witkoff, is in Moscow for negotiating a ceasefire deal between Russia and Ukraine. While Kyiv has endorsed an American proposal for a 30-day ceasefire, the ball remains in Russia's court. Meanwhile, Vladimir Putin has made it clear that truce along the border shall take place only if Ukraine abandons its NATO aspirations. Apart from this, he has emphasized that the 30-day ceasefire should not be used for military mobilization in Ukraine. Additionally, while agreeing to a mercy plea for Ukrainian soldiers, Putin has listed one more demand. He has agreed to pardon Ukrainian troops on the condition that Zelenskyy surrenders territories annexed in Kursk. But even as Trump says he has got some pretty good news, Zelenskyy has urged the United States to not let Russia play around. We'll talk about this with our guest. Joining us on the show is Ambassador Pradeep Kapoor, former diplomat. Glenn Grant, ex-advisor of Ukrainian Defense Minister, is also joining us on the show. Mr. Daniel Wagner, CEO of Country Risk Solutions, is also with us on the program. Last but by no means the least, Mr. Rabindra Sachdev, international affairs expert, also joins us for this all-important conversation. Mr. Grant, I will begin with you. Well, there seems to be a mobilization of some peace, or rather the talk of it, but right now it all seems to be very ambivalent. There's nothing that has been in fact said by both the leaders that guarantees that there will be peace between Russia and Ukraine. Zelenskyy has already been admonished by Donald Trump in that famous White House video, but he does seem undeterred from his aspirations to join NATO. What is your take on the latest developments here, sir?
Well, I think the first thing you have to remember is that Russia invaded Ukraine, not the other way around, and that Ukraine is the victim and remains the victim, and that even yesterday there were 300 plus rockets heading their way, drones heading their way into Ukrainian territory. So you have to remember that this is the background. The background, firstly, for Zelenskyy is that the country is being attacked and continues to be attacked, and that Russia is not just attacking, but is actually focusing on things like hospitals, schools, and civilian buildings, not on military places. So that's the background. Putin has shown no evidence whatsoever that he wants peace. Zelenskyy needs peace. He needs peace for the country, and he needs peace because the country is being battered. Putin doesn't need peace. Putin is set on disrupting the Western order. He's set on disrupting the European Union and on dominating and bullying everybody else. And you can see this very much by the fact that the special envoy from Trump went to Moscow and was kept 8 hours waiting to see Putin, which is hardly the act of someone who actually wants peace in any way. So I think you have to see it in that line. Peace is not on the table. It doesn't matter how you look at it, because Putin has shown no evidence whatsoever that he is going to either stop or make any compromises at all. In fact, he's actually asking for more. Very Charles Dickens. Can I have some more, please?
Very true.
So
sir.
That's the situation.
Very rightly said, sir. Mr. Wagner, what do you make of the situation? Mr. Grant had put it very explicitly that this is not the body language of a leader who wants peace. Then why is Donald Trump so confident that he can secure peace?
People who want peace, they go to the peace table and they talk. That's not what Putin is doing. Far from it, as Glenn said. My take on this situation is that Trump is in an alternative reality. He believes what he wants to believe. No one's going to be able to tell him different. When he says good things are going to happen soon, well, I have no reason to see why that would be true. Why does he think that? My view is that Putin is, from his perspective, rightly simply playing this out and utilizing more time to do things like take additional territory back that was previously in Ukrainian hands, or try to make more advances. Even if the peace process were to start tomorrow, this is a multi-week or multi-month process. It's not like it's going to end next week. I would also add that I think something fundamental is missing from this process. On one hand, you've got Zelenskyy, who is rightly focused on Ukraine. You've got Trump, who only cares about America. But you've got Putin, who wants this peace process to encompass something much, much broader. He wants to address the larger issue of NATO membership with Ukraine. He wants to address the larger issue of potential future European or NATO troops in Ukraine. He also is thinking about this in sort of big power terms, i.e., what does all of this imply for his relationship with China and Iran? So unless the Europeans are going to be at the peace table to discuss the idea of European troops, because Putin and Zelenskyy and Trump can't do that for them, I don't see how Putin is going to be satisfied or how this entire process is going to reach some sort of logical conclusion.
All right, Ambassador Kapoor, going by what our previous panelists have also said, do you think that the seriousness that should be displayed by either of the leaders when it comes to talking peace is not there? And Donald Trump used this as a plank to get re-elected as the President of the United States for a second time. How important is this likely for him?
Well, I would, tend to differ somewhat from
Donald Trump perhaps can talk to Zelenskyy in the Oval Office the way they did, but they definitely cannot talk to Putin the way they did to Zelenskyy.
Yeah, here you cannot, I would, beg to differ from what the other panelists have said so far. You cannot compare apples and oranges. Zelenskyy was used as a puppet by the deep state, by the military-industrial complex of the Western world, of US, of Europe, to sort of, egg on to sacrifice his people, his country, his infrastructure, his everything. And they were using his shoulders to fire their guns to weaken Russia. Now, from 1945, the Western world, I think, has been playing games which are now finally coming out in the open. There was a good opportunity, a good possibility to get together with Russia, particularly after the fall of the Soviet Union. And instead of expanding the NATO borders right up to Ukraine, which is a significant geostrategic and a geopolitical threat to Russia, I think they could have been a little more sensitive and understood where their, benefits are, where their bread is buttered. Because if you have to push Russia into the arms of China, you're creating a behemoth enemy which you are not going to be able to cope. I think Donald Trump, from that perspective, has shown much more wisdom than all the other Western leaders, including the previous administration here, because he is more interested in peace at any cost rather than war at any cost, which was the earlier paradigm. Now, if you are a person who has been, working in the area of real estate earlier, and you realize that infrastructure prospers, real estate prospers when there is peace. And we have seen the damage that this has created not only to Ukraine, but to the economies of the European countries, economy of USA, economies of the world. People have suffered far and near everywhere, Africa, the developing countries, because the prices of grains have gone up, because this area between Ukraine and Russia used to supply a significant percentage of the global energy requirements, the global crop requirements. Now you have destroyed all those supply chains in the process of just trying to weaken Russia in your long-term goals of making sure that you're able to somehow break up this huge country into smaller portions, smaller countries. Now that is unfortunate. I think the current trends for working towards peace are good. They have to recognize the strategic issues which are important for all the countries involved, including for Ukraine, including for Europe, but also including for Russia, which has so far been, dealt with in a very negligent fashion, in the sense that your strategic concerns don't matter a whit to us. That has been the attitude since 1945 and since 1991. That has to change. It's an important country. India has the right sort of take on Russia in terms of understanding its sensitivities and not trying to push it into the Chinese camp, and realizing that it has, a lot of strategic depth. We have seen what happened to Napoleon. We have seen what happened to Hitler in World War II when he invaded Russia. So you cannot trifle with a country like that and try to make it an enemy, even if it is not wanting to be an enemy. So how do you do that is what I think probably is better understood by the current administration here, and not so far by the Europeans who are still playing games. I think the earlier they realize that they have to stop playing games and get on to a serious track of negotiations, of diplomacy, of discussions, of safeguarding their future energy needs, their future economies, their future, relationship with the world. And you are losing more and more importance on the global stage with every passing day. For you to try to claim back that colonial, glory or the aura is now way past its time. See the current realities of the world, see the current truths of the world, and then, adjust to that is what my take would be.
Okay. Let me open Mr. Sachdev into this conversation as well. Mr. Sachdev, it's a very precarious situation at this point in time. It could swing either way, but the fact of the matter is that there seems to be a trust deficit as well. There could be an agreement on a ceasefire, but the world at large and the geopolitical community also at large feels that Vladimir Putin is perhaps not going to follow that ceasefire.
Thank you so much.
Because he's violated it before in the past as well.
Sure, definitely so. But then, if you look at world history, so many world leaders have violated so many things. What happened to the guarantee that Ukraine got? The US was also party to it, I think, when they gave up their nuclear weapons. So nations work according to their needs, and they suit and create their narratives as per their needs, depending upon the context. But yeah, Putin is there. But, what I'll say is that, one, you said that the world is at a certain point in a swing. I think this tango which is going on between Putin and Trump will go on, will stretch. But Putin will have to be careful up to a point that it doesn't come across, there's a saying I remember, I think, hell hath no fury like a woman scorned. So Putin can go up till that point with Trump, unless he pushes Trump to the other side and Trump says, okay, now this man has totally, let down my trust of whatever Trump thought, and then Trump will bounce back, okay? So that's the fine nuance, I think, or the tripwire that Putin is walking, trying to get maximum that he can via his negotiations, via his delaying tactics, or via whatever he's asking. And as has been said, that he's wanting to address, quote unquote, the root causes of the conflict. So obviously it means that, and discussing about the quote unquote root causes will not be, I think, a matter of a few weeks or a few days. That will take much longer negotiations. So therefore, a ceasefire, I'm not so sure even a 30-day ceasefire could happen soon, because one, of course, Russia has objections that if we do a ceasefire, then Ukraine will rearm. And same way, Ukraine has agreed to it apparently for a 30-day pause. But Russia is saying that if we pause, then, Ukraine can rearm and we will lose our momentum, so we don't want a 30-day. What Putin could do, I think, maybe he could go in, because now he has to, I think, give something to Trump where things are. He has to give something. So he may, he may agree to a 2-week pause. So let's say for evacuation of the medically wounded, etc. So that could be something, I think, or some other little win that Putin would or should give, I think, at this point in the chess game that he is playing with Trump. Now, as to a ceasefire, quote unquote, that will be extremely complicated, as I think all of us here are looking. There are various things, various non-negotiable demands from both sides. Okay, Zelenskyy seems to have agreed. We do not know to what extent, but has he agreed to give up, his demands that Russia go back from all territory? It seems Crimea, maybe he's not asking for it. Maybe he's asking for, something. But Russia may say that all 4 provinces that we have declared will be ours, even if we do not, possess portions of the lands in those provinces, right? So there'll be several, and the security guarantees and the peacemakers and all, and the guarantee for NATO, that root causes. So a discussion and a negotiation on these root causes, I think, would take time. So a ceasefire, I'm little skeptical of some meaningful ceasefire beyond a few days. But Putin will have to give something to Trump. That's one. Overall, so okay, a lot will depend upon the telephone call, which is coming up in the next coming days. Apparently, Putin has said, "I'll be happy to make a call." So there could be a call, and then we will see the next steps. One little sideshow that I was a little bit, find interesting. It was Steve Witkoff who was in Moscow discussing with Putin. Witkoff has been nominated as the envoy to the Middle East. The envoy for the Ukraine issue is General Keith Kellogg. Keith Kellogg is nowhere in the picture, and apparently he's been sidelined because he's been seen as a bit too sympathetic to the Ukrainian cause. The other thing which I find interesting is that Witkoff left Moscow, flew down to Baku, and from Baku wherever he went. And today Russia has announced that we are open and there's a peace deal in the works between Armenia and Azerbaijan. So there are some other games also going on. So could be the US is also party to this, these moves for a peace between Azerbaijan and Armenia, which Russia is back again now saying that we will mediate. Otherwise, Russia for some time was losing its clout, I think both with Armenia and Azerbaijan, right? But now it seems that somehow Azerbaijan, Armenia are coming to a table and Moscow is the one bringing them together. So those are some side shows also going on, again lending a point, a lens to the point that it's a
okay. All right. Let me rope in Mr. Grant once again. Mr. Grant, basis on what the other panelists have also said and enunciated, what do you think Donald Trump is going to do at this point in time? Where does this put him?
I think it puts him in a very difficult position because he's laid his cards on the line. He's bullied Ukraine to a disgusting degree. I don't think anybody can disagree with that. And he's constantly talked about the fact that he has a good relationship, that good things are going to come from Putin. But I just don't, as I said, I just don't see that Putin is playing the same game as Donald Trump. And I think I want to jump just very quickly back on one point that the ambassador said about NATO and not taking any interest. I was around when the wall came down, and I was involved in negotiations with Russia. And I can tell you that the US and others tried extremely hard to negotiate and to deal with Russia in the early 90s. Extremely hard. And a lot of energy was put into it. And a lot of energy was put in through a lot of people, including papers, one of which I actually hand-delivered to a Russian ambassador from UK. And so I know that we actually tried to do our level-headed best. So I think that you need to reassess some of your thinking in the lights of that, because we're not so bad as you seem to think we are.
You're absolutely right, sir. And this is obviously worrying for Donald Trump as well. Mr. Wagner, same question to you. Does this also put Donald Trump in a bit of a fix? He perhaps is stuck between the devil and the deep blue sea right now.
Completely agree. And this is, of course, a situation of his own making. The idea that he would be sending his golfing buddy, Witkoff, who had no prior experience in diplomatic negotiations, to be the chief point of contact for Putin is absurd in my view. And the idea that somehow Trump is this geopolitical genius, master strategist, is similarly absurd from my perspective. I think Trump is what he's trying to do is he's projecting what successes he has had in the real estate business into the geopolitical arena and imagining that if he just applies the same tactics, everything's going to fall right into place and he's going to strong arm who he needs to, and everything is just going to be puppy dogs and rainbows. That's not the way things work on the world stage. And I think he's finding that out. You would think he would have learned that in his first go around, but apparently not. I think we're going to see completely unexpected twists and turns in this process. I don't see how the original ideas that Trump has had in his version of peace and what post-war Ukraine is going to look like are likely to bear much in the way of reality. And I also want to take issue with what the ambassador said vis-a-vis a post-war geopolitical strategy between the US and Russia. The very idea that Trump would be chucking 80 years of American foreign policy out the window to cozy up to Putin and abandon all of that policy, all of our allies, and simply keep in his mind this ridiculous vision that he's got of what the world is going to look like under Trump. I don't see how this ends very well, and I think we're probably likely in for a multi-month process, and the fighting is only likely to continue.
Mr. Kapoor, in fact, there have been calls from other leaders, especially in Europe, to intensify this war against Vladimir Putin. In fact, UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer also warned Putin, said that there will be further galvanization of forces towards Russia with or without the Americans. Now, this seems to be a paradigm shift in the kind of space that the world has seen geopolitically.
Well, Vineet, I think the situation is extremely complicated, and Europe is only trying to increase the complexity and the complications in the situations in different ways. Now, when you are in a very difficult situation and a very complicated situation like currently exists in Ukraine, between Ukraine and Russia, between Europe and Russia, between NATO and Ukraine, between NATO and Russia, between the US, between China, there are so many factors at play. Now, either you can continue to further complicate the situation and make it more difficult towards a resolution, or you can slowly try the path of negotiations and diplomacy, like India has been saying that, diplomacy is more important than war. So how do you achieve that with achieving future guarantees of security for the countries concerned, for the human beings? And if I have to talk to a Ukrainian today who's lost his all and his family is disrupted, some part of his family is in some country, his daily earnings are disrupted, his job is disrupted, his employment his peace is disrupted, his mental peace is disrupted. So I'm just looking at that basic unit of the individual, and you can understand what a massive amount of disruption has taken place for an entire country of maybe 50 million or so. Now, are you going to continue by making it even worse for all the people concerned in this issue, or are you trying to see what is the way out of this dark tunnel which has been built, particularly by the Western world, jointly? At that stage, when Putin had put his 100,000 army soldiers on the ground, there were certain clear-cut possibilities of negotiations, discussions. We are also told that in the month of March 2023, Zelenskyy had almost finalized a document whereby he was going to state that Ukraine is not going to join NATO. And Boris Johnson was asked to rush to Ukraine, Kyiv, by Biden to tell him to not to proceed ahead on that path. Now, if those are the sort of things which we keep on hearing from a lot of circles, which may be possibly true and correct also, there are so many different phases that there would have been possibilities to bring down the tempers, to bring down the temperatures, to work towards peace, to work towards negotiations, to work towards diplomacy. The Indian leader also tried, but currently,
all right, so we have completely run out of time, but appreciate everybody who joined us. We have to move on. Thank you so much, everyone.